Not every curse comes from a stranger. Sometimes the person who drains your light knows your birthday, knows your habits, knows exactly how to say just enough to stay close, but not enough to set you free. They know your softness. They've seen your history, and that familiarity, it gives them access, not through brute force, not through rituals or threats, but through something more dangerous, unquestioned emotional permission. You never said, "Come in and manipulate me." You never said, "Take my energy whenever you want." But over time, because of memories, shared years, or the illusion of loyalty, they slip past your gates, and now you're exhausted. Not after a fight, but after a visit. Not from their words, but from their presence. Your thoughts spiral after they leave. Your body tenses when they text. Your energy shifts, and you don't know why. This isn't superstition. This isn't paranoia. This is spiritual invasion through emotional familiarity. And it happens more than you think, because when someone knows your pattern, they don't need spells. They just need history. They don't need permission. They already have your attachment. And that, to the unguarded soul, is more effective than any curse. The Stoics may not have spoken in terms of energy and frequency, but they understood this: you must stand upright, not be set upright. Marcus Aurelius. In other words, if you don't take responsibility for your center, someone else will take residence from there. This episode is about what happens when people who mean something to you begin to erode your sovereignty, not with rage, but with presence, not with cruelty, but with closeness. And how you, as someone on the path of awareness and inner mastery, can protect your mind, your energy, and your soul without needing to become bitter or closed off. Because not all danger comes loud, and not all invasion looks like harm. Sometimes the greatest spiritual drain comes wrapped in old friendship, shared history, or even love. Let's begin. The illusion of safety. Why we let the wrong people stay inside the gate. We're taught to fear the unknown, the stranger in the shadows, the outsider who might harm us, the obvious threat. But the truth is, in spiritual warfare, familiarity is the perfect disguise. When someone has always been around, you stop questioning their presence. You assume they belong inside the gate, not because they earn it now, but because they've always been there. That's the illusion. We think time equals trust, that longevity equals loyalty, that old connections are safe connections. But time doesn't prove alignment. Only presence does. You don't feel drained by strangers. You feel drained by those you've already let in. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Because when your spiritual boundaries are blurred by emotional history, you begin to override your instincts. You excuse the discomfort. You silence the inner warning. You say, "They didn't mean it. It's just how they are." We go way back. And in doing so, you surrender your discernment in exchange for nostalgia. Marcus Aurelius warned, if someone does wrong, the harm lies not in what they do, but in your response to it. But what happens when your response is muted? Not because you don't notice, but because you don't want to believe. When the person who destabilizes your spirit is someone who once made you feel safe, it creates internal dissonance. So you delay, you justify, you wait for a clearer sign, something more obvious than the quiet fog you feel after every conversation. But that fog isn't a sign. You're not paranoid, you're perceptive. And the longer you stay in denial, the more space they occupy. Not just in your life, but in your field. Because when someone has lived in your emotional house for years, they don't knock before entering. They assume the right to stay, to speak into your mind, to question your growth, to tether you to the version of you they're most comfortable with. And here's the Stoic truth. Do not be deceived. People are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of them. Epictetus, you're not disturbed because they're evil. You're disturbed because they're too close, and your soul knows it's time to step back, not with hate, not with drama, but with awareness. Because not everyone who was once inside your life is meant to stay inside your energy. And the longer you confuse the two, the longer the invasion continues, with your silent consent. When emotional history becomes energetic access, they don't need to control you with threats. They only need to remind you of what you shared. Because the longer someone has been part of your emotional story, the more spiritual access they gain, even without words. Why? Because memory creates pathways. The moments you laughed together, the seasons they walked with you through pain, the vulnerable things you told them, not because they forced you, but because at the time you trusted them. Those moments built connection, but connection without current alignment becomes a soul-level vulnerability. Because you're not responding to who they are now, you're responding to who they used to be to you. That's how emotional history opens energetic gates. They don't knock, they don't force, they simply return, and your system softens. Because your body remembers them as safe, even when your intuition is whispering otherwise. This is how spiritual invasion hides in memory. They touch a part of you that was once seen. They speak in tones that remind you of comfort. They use old versions of you as keys to unlock present access they no longer deserve. And because it doesn't feel like violence, you allow it. You let the conversation go longer. You delay the boundary. You give them one more chance. Not because they've earned it now, but because they once did. But Stoicism reminds us, we must cease to consider what we have been and consider what we are. Seneca. In other words, do not confuse emotional legacy with current worth. What they meant to you does not obligate you to stay open forever. Ask yourself, are they entering through current alignment or past access? Do they still deserve presence, or are they borrowing it from your memory bank? Does your body feel energized by their return or quietly disturbed? Because sometimes the people who return into your life aren't returning for reconnection. They're returning for re-entry. To reclaim the seat they once had inside your energy field. And unless you're fully aware, you'll hand it to them out of habit, not discernment. The contract may be old, but if you keep letting them in, your nervous system doesn't know it's expired. It thinks, they've been here before. This is familiar. And that familiarity, it becomes a false invitation. So here's the shift. From now on, access must be earned, not inherited. Not all old stories deserve a new chapter. And not every familiar face deserves a front row seat in the new frequency you're building. Your energy is not a museum of past loyalty. It is a living space, reserved for who honors your present clarity, the familiar frequency, how their energy rewires you. Not all influence is verbal. Some of it is vibrational. You felt it. You're grounded until they arrive. You're clear until they speak. You were having a good day until the message came through. And suddenly your center is shifting. Your thoughts speed up. Your mood drops. Your nervous system enters a low-level disorientation. They didn't criticize you. They didn't demand anything, but their energy, just their presence, altered you. This is the power of familiar frequency. Their emotional tone, their way of being, their subtle patterns. They don't just exist outside you. They begin to echo inside you because your body remembers them. Your field recognizes them. And if you're not careful, you start to entrain. Entrainment is a concept in physics and energy. Two frequencies placed together eventually begin to sync. The stronger, more consistent rhythm dominates. So when someone has a dominant energetic pattern, especially one rooted in anxiety, guilt, chaos, or control, it can start to override your steadiness. Not because you're weak, but because you're not open. This is why the Stoics were so relentless about protecting their internal world. Marcus Aurelius trained himself. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But that's not just philosophical, it's energetic, because your mind is not just a thinker, it's a receiver. And when you're around someone with whom you have deep history, your receiver lowers its defenses and starts absorbing. That's how your center gets rewritten, without asking, without violence, just exposure, and it's not always in the obvious ways. You laugh when you didn't want to, you explain when you weren't questioned, you feel off, but you smile anyway. And afterward, you're tired, heavy, quietly unsettled. But you can't name why. It's not what they said, it's what they carry, and how easily your system lets it in. So what do? You don't shut down, you sharpen. You notice who shifts your rhythm, who makes your clarity cloudy, who feels like home, but also like a pattern you're trying to escape. And then you remember not all familiarity is alignment, not all comfort is healing, some is programming. And Stoicism teaches you not to panic at this truth, but to pause, to say, I will not let presence override principle. You can love someone, you can honor the past, but if their frequency rewires your clarity, they are not safe. Not for your nervous system, not for your future. Familiar doesn't mean right, it means practiced. And the more you practice presence with the wrong energy, the more your soul forgets its natural rhythm. So today, start remembering. Not who they were, not what you shared, but who you become every time they enter the room. Love, loyalty, and spiritual leverage. When emotional bonds become energetic chains. Love is sacred, loyalty is rare, but when misused, they become the perfect tools of divine spiritual leverage. You don't notice it at first. You're helping because you care. You're staying because you remember what they meant to you. You're giving because you don't want to be the one who lets go first. But slowly, what started as love becomes a kind of binding. Not legal, not verbal, but energetic. You feel responsible for their moods. You adjust to preserve their comfort. You tolerate behavior that violates your inner peace because you owe them something. That's not devotion. That's debt. This is how spiritual predators hide inside emotional history. They say after all I've done for you, I was there when no one else was. Don't forget who believed in you first. And those words don't just land in your ears, they land in your soul. You start feeling like your growth is betrayal. Your boundary is ingratitude. Your silence is cruelty. But Stoicism calls that out for what it is. He who receives a benefit should not forget it, but he who gives should not remember it. Seneca true love doesn't keep score. It doesn't expect repayment. It doesn't disguise ownership as support. But emotional predators use our spiritual memory as leverage. They turn your empathy into obedience, your gratitude into compliance. And over time, you stop acting from truth. You start acting from emotional contracts you never agreed to. Ask yourself, are you staying out of alignment or out of loyalty? Are you giving from love or guilt? Are you connected or just entangled? Because love that doesn't allow freedom is no longer love. It's spiritual possession, not with chains, but with memories. And Stoicism teaches, do not bind yourself to those who prevent you from being free. So if someone insists that you owe them your peace because they once offered theirs, step back. You're not ungrateful. You're awake. Because spiritual leverage feels like love. Until you realize you're carrying a weight that was never meant to be yours, and when you set it down, gently, firmly, finally, you remember something sacred. Love offered freely asks for nothing, and real loyalty never demands self-abandonment. Stoic recognition, how to see through emotional fog and restore clarity. When someone has emotional history with you, they don't have to push you. They just have to cloud you. You don't realize you're lost in it until it's too late. That lingering pressure to explain yourself. The guilt that arrives even when you've done nothing wrong. The exhaustion you feel after conversations that look, on the surface, completely normal. That's the emotional fog. And like any fog, it doesn't force you to stop. It just makes it hard to know where you are. So how do you navigate it? Not with emotion, but with wadi, recognition. This is where Stoicism becomes more than philosophy. It becomes a compass. Because fog doesn't require force to trap you. It only needs you to stop trusting your vision. And Stoicism says, reclaim your inner perception. Marcus Aurelius wrote, if you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. That means the fog isn't the danger, it's how you interpret it. If you think guilt means you failed, you'll submit. If you think discomfort means you're being cruel, you'll apologize for being clear. But if you learn to recognize the fog for what it is, a subtle distortion caused by emotional entanglement, you can begin to clear it. Ask yourself, is this person responding to who I am or trying to return me to who I was? Am I choosing this interaction or just trying to avoid the fallout of saying no? Is the weight I'm carrying mine or something they silently placed on me? These questions don't remove the fog instantly, but they pierce it with precision. Because clarity isn't loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet, still, resolute. It says, I see what is happening. I may not fully understand it yet, but I no longer agree to be confused by it. That moment, when you stop justifying your fatigue, when you stop minimizing your own distortion, when you look at the dynamic without sentimentality, that's Stoic recognition. It's the refusal to confuse emotion with truth. This doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you start seeing. And once you see the pattern, you stop feeding it, not with your time, not with your explanation, not with your energy. You just step back, and the fog, it begins to clear. Not because they changed, but because you finally stop pretending that love should ever come at the cost of your vision. Clean break versus energetic decoupling. Choosing separation. That actually sets you free. You walked away. You blocked the number. You muted the thread. You said what needed to be said, or you said nothing at all. And yet, they're still in your head, still in your energy, still showing up in your dreams, still shaping the choices you make when no one's watching. That's because separation isn't always liberation. Sometimes what we call cutting them off is really just a physical exit without spiritual closure. And if you've ever felt that strange tether, even after distance has been created, what you're feeling is unfinished energetic coupling. You see, closeness, real or toxic, doesn't just exist in time and space. It creates pathways. And unless those pathways are consciously cleared, you carry their influence long after they're gone. This is why Stoicism doesn't just preach detachment, it teaches alignment. Because true detachment isn't silence, it's clarity without craving. It's being able to remember them without reopening the wound. It's being able to feel the pull and not walk back into the pattern. Seneca warned, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And I'd add, to be with someone physically gone but spiritually entangled is to still be under their influence. So how do you truly break free? Not by ghosting, not by burning bridges, not even by confrontation, but by decoupling the energy you once shared, the expectation you once carried, the contract you never signed but still honored. That starts with asking, what part of me still needs to prove I was right? What part of me is waiting for their apology to feel whole? What version of myself did I hand to them that I've yet to reclaim? Because it's not just about them, it's about the version of you that still believes they define something essential. Here's the Stoic shift. You don't need permission to move on. You don't need a perfect ending. You don't need mutual understanding. You need energetic authority. The kind that says, I release the role I once played. I revoke access to the part of me they once occupied. I let go, not out of anger, but because I have returned to myself. Clean breaks are surface level. Energetic decoupling is soul level. And when done well, you don't need to declare it. You just feel different, more quiet, more empty, but in the best way. Like space has returned, like your thoughts are finally your own. And that is freedom, not escape, but sovereignty restored, anchoring in inner sovereignty, building a life they can't re-enter without permission. Some people don't knock when they return. They don't ask, can I come back into your life? They just appear. A text, a memory, a glance through a mutual friend, and somehow your entire system tenses. Why? Because at some point in your past, you gave them a key, not to your house, but to your mind. And unless you've changed the locks, they still believe they can walk in. That's what inner sovereignty is about. Not just setting boundaries once, but fortifying the foundation so that even if they return, they can't gain entry unless you open the door. And here's the truth most people avoid. If you don't design your inner world deliberately, it will always be open to whoever speaks the right emotional language. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius trained his awareness. You have power over your mind, not outside events. But in today's world, emotional memory is an event. Familiarity is an event. One text can feel like a pull back into a life you worked hard to outgrow. That's why sovereignty must become ritual. You build a life that protects your energy on autopilot. Let's make this practical. Number 1, create energetic architecture. Your day should include anchors that bring you back to you. Morning stillness, boundaried communication windows, time for solitude that isn't negotiable. You don't live by default anymore. You live by design. Number 2, define your current values. Who are you now? Because the person they knew may not exist anymore. Write them down, speak them aloud, let your decisions reflect them. So when someone from the past tries to return, your filter isn't emotion, it's alignment. Number 3, rewire the gate response. You don't need to fear a message from them. You need to recognize your choice. Pause, ask, do I respond from old pattern or present truth? Does this serve my peace or test it? This awareness is your lock, not to keep everyone out, but to keep you centered when they show up. Because here's the Stoic truth. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus. And mastery doesn't mean being untouched. It means being undirected. By energy that no longer belongs. They might knock, they might call, they might even cry. But when your sovereignty is intact, they meet silence, not because you hate them, but because you finally belong to yourself. And when you belong to yourself fully, the door may still exist, but it's no longer unlocked by history. It opens only to those who know how to honor the temple you've built. When they return, the test of the open door, they always come back. Maybe not today, maybe not through the same path, but the ones who once fed on your energy, who lived inside your emotional space like it was theirs, they circle back, sometimes with kindness, sometimes with silence, sometimes with, I've changed. And when they do, you'll feel it, that flicker of hesitation, that tightening in the chest, that thought, should I open the door? This is a moment of test, not of strength, but of hot self-clarity. Because once you've reclaimed your center, you'll be tested by the very energy that once disoriented it. But here's what Stoicism teaches. When the soul is fortified with reason, it cannot be shaken by the return of old winds. So you must ask, am I tempted by healing or by habit? Do I miss them or the version of me I used to be around them? Is their return a reconciliation or invasion? Because they might not look threatening. They may bring no anger, no obvious demand, just warmth, just familiarity, just the idea of peace. But peace built on nostalgia is not peace. It's repetition, and repetition is the enemy of transformation. So what do you do when they return? You don't panic, you out-observe. How do they speak? Do they honor your silence or try to pierce it? Do they recognize your growth or subtly steer you back to softness? This is not about cutting people off blindly. It's about choosing who walks through the door consciously. Because in the past you left it open by default. Now you leave it open by design. And if they don't match your current frequency, they may knock, but they do not enter. Here's a practice. Before replying, say aloud, I am no longer the version of me they once knew. Let it anchor you. Let it remind your body, your field, your soul. You are not available to old energies that no longer match your alignment. They might have history, they might have tears, they might even have changed. But you have clarity. And clarity doesn't close the door out of fear. It simply knows that not every knock deserves an answer. Because the ones who truly respect your sovereignty don't ask to come in. They wait at the gate until they're invited. Closing plus Stoic truth minus not all. Closeness is love, and not all distance is unkindness. Closeness is not always care. History is not always safety. And love, real love, never needs to hijack your soul to feel secure. Sometimes the most dangerous energy is not the one that screams at the gate. It's the one that already has a key because you gave it years ago. Or maybe you never meant to. Maybe they took it gently by saying the right things at the right time. by knowing how to feel like home before you ever questioned what that home was built on. But now you see, you feel the pull, you feel the weight, and you finally understand this isn't just emotional discomfort, it's spiritual distortion. And your clarity, that's your first act of reclaiming. The Stoics taught us not to hate, not to fear, but to understand. And from that understanding, choose a path of strength. Marcus Aurelius said, "Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself." Not strict as in rigid, but as in sovereign. Know where your line is. Know what peace feels like in your own body. Know who, when they return, brings fog, and who brings calm. And if you're unsure, here's your test. After they leave, do you feel more yourself or less? That answer is everything. So if you've made it this far in the episode, maybe you're starting to remember what you've always known. That not every return deserves a welcome. That some people taught you loyalty just to earn access. That silence is not cruelty. Sometimes it's uncorrection. And above all, not all closeness is love, and not all distance is unkindness. If this episode helped you name something you've long felt but never quite understood, comment below. I protect my energy, even from the familiar. Let it be your declaration. Let it be your reset, because you're not cold. You're finally learning to guard what was once wide open. And now, the gate still exists, but it no longer swings freely just because someone used to live there. Like this video, share it with someone who keeps letting the past back in just because it knocks gently. Subscribe for more Stoic strength, energetic awareness, and deep clarity in a chaotic world. Until next time, stay awake, stay anchored, stay sovereign, because your soul is sacred, and it deserves a door that only opens to what honors it.